Hey everyone, welcome to another ChangeNerd webcast. This is your first time joining us. Feel free to sit back, relax, and listen to the incredible Aisha today. I can't wait to introduce you all to her. If this is your second, third, or you are a veteran of ChangeNerd, we invite you, again, sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation today about one of probably the most relevant concepts and topics that we have going on right now. I'm going to throw this word out there and then we're going to unpack it. Today, Aisha and I are going to talk about detractors. So that's it for a little bit, right? Like detractors, right? I know many of you right now that are in our community or you're watching this on LinkedIn or our YouTube channel, you're thinking, what? Who's a detractor? Am I a detractor? Who knows? But we're going to get into this today and talk about a couple of the ways that we're going to engage detractors. We're going to define detractors. I'm going to talk all about it, especially Aisha's book that we'll get into in a little bit that has a whole chapter on detractors as well. So hi, Aisha.
Hey, Stephanie. So great to be here today.
Yeah, thanks for having us. And also just being here and sharing your words of wisdom. Let me tell the ChangeNerd community a little about you. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay.
Share whatever you want.
All right. Okay. I'm going to share a lot because you are absolutely incredible and your background is super dope. So I'm here with Aisha Relaford, as you all know. Not only is Aisha a corporate healthcare executive in the world of business transformation, which I know just perked up a lot of ears in our ChangeNerd community, but you're so results driven and you're so visionary. And I think that's one of the things that I really connected with you most about, which is why I was like, please come on our ChangeNerd, webcast. Like, let's chat, let's have a conversation. And as a result of that, you and I chatted. You've worked for General Electric, you've worked for Pfizer, which I know is a hot, company right now. You work for McKinsey and Company, a number of other organizations, especially with the C-suite. And you really have some unique perspectives on organizational transformation, how to really look at the people side of things, how to be a leader, a coach. You really target sort of those large scale transformations. So we're excited to have you today because also your academic background is incredible. So I'm excited to talk to another academic as well. You graduated from Harvard with in economics, and then also from right here in Chicago, University of Chicago, Booth School of Business with your MBA. So you've got all the frameworks, all the education, and all this experiential knowledge. So I'm excited to chat with you today about our key word, detractors. So let's actually get into it.
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's actually define detractors. Like, I hear the word detractor, that's great. But, there's so much going on right now. And I think, as Brian and I talk a lot about, as a lot of our ChangeNerd, our ChangeNerds in our community talk about, it's like, man, if people would just get out of the way, right? Like everything would just be so easy. So when I hear detractors, that's what I think of. But I need your insight on it. Like, who is a detractor? What is a detractor? So talk to me a little bit.
Yeah, Stephanie. So first, hi to everyone in the Change Nerd community. I'm really excited to be here today and to connect with, quite honestly, like-minded people who are also focused on making an impact and driving large-scale transformation. So when I think about detractors, and I try to keep things simple, and we could talk about maybe why down the road when you learn a little bit more about me, but I really think about influential key stakeholders who are not supportive of change. And that can come in different flavors, right? You may have people who are resistors, actively resisting the transformation. You may have some people that are what I like to call kind of apathetic bystanders. Sure, do what you want, but they're not really engaged. And then you have the naysayers, among other groups, right? Who are like, well, we tried that before and it didn't work, right? How many times have we heard that? Or I don't know that that's going to work here. I know that worked for you somewhere else. So it can come in many different flavors. And one of the things you mentioned before is, there are times where we want them to get out of the way, but part of what I want to leave with you all as a thought today is that it's actually having detractors is a good thing. I mean, we're talking about driving major transformation. And I would almost question if you don't have people saying, wait a second, put on the brakes here. Maybe your transformation isn't as transformational as you thought. So something has to change. We are making a shift and everyone's not comfortable with the shift, especially if you're asking them to do the shifting. So detractors, I want to put that in everyone's mind today. Detractors are a good thing, and there's ways, and we can get into it, that you can leverage them to your advantage.
Yeah, I love it. And there's a lot of sort of analogies, or what do they call it? Sort of those things where it's like with the word shift, like a lot of like funny taglines and quotes that you could potentially use, right? To like make the shift, if you will, because you got to be careful, making sure you put the F in there. Um, with that being said, I love those three categories. Can you just kind of repeat those again for the audience, because there's one that I want to focus in on, but just kind of repeat those for us, and then we're going to hone in just on one for a second.
Sure. And these are just three I think of. I would love,
Sure.
as a follow-up for others to share categories of detractors that they've dealt with. One are what I call active resistors. And they're just like, I don't want to do it. They say it in many ways, but they don't show up to your meetings. They say no, they ignore you. They're actively resisting the change. Second, I like to call apathetic bystanders. They don't have an opinion, they don't care. Their actions are like, sure, okay, can you do it? They're not engaged at all. They're just kind of watching it happen. And then the third group that I talked about are the naysayers. We can't do it. I can't do it. We tried it and it didn't work. So they can always come up with an excuse around why it can't happen versus think of all the opportunities and why we should put forth the energy to make it happen. So those are three groups that I have consistently encountered, and I'm sure all of you have too, within your organizations.
Absolutely. So this is great. So I know people who are listening right now are like, okay, like how do I even identify them first and foremost, right? Like what does that actually look like? Because, we don't want to profile people. They might be different in a different entity. They might have like underlying competing commitments. Like if I do this change, then I can't spend enough time, with my partner or my family, or go to my kid's soccer game, and or there could be something underlying. But like, how do we actually identify them?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, a little bit back to the definition that I gave, key influential stakeholders. So, as you're thinking about the stakeholders involved in your change management, look, you have sponsors, you have the groups that I like to call driving the change, they're influential. You have the people who have to accept the change. When you start getting into those stakeholder groups, are the ones who are actively the ones developing the solution, that those are kind of your key influencers. But within that, you then have to think about who are the people that are needed in order to make this work go ahead, right? So that helps you determine what level of support do I need from certain people in order to accelerate the change or to ensure that challenges or obstacles can be addressed timely or to ensure the message is getting out. And so understanding, once you know who's key and influential, what level of support you need from them, and really understanding where are they today and where do I need them tomorrow, right? Because there's a lot of people who are cheerleaders and they're exactly where you need them today. Those aren't the folks you need to focus on. We want to talk about the people who aren't where we need them long term in order for the organization and the work that you're doing to be successful. And I think that's kind of the critical where you can really start to narrow down the list to hopefully not only departments, but specific people. And they'll be at all levels of the organization. And so it's a really great exercise to sit down and do with your team, as I'm sure a few people will kind of pop into your head immediately in terms of their subtle ways that they show up, but there'll be others too that you should think about.
Yeah, that's great. And what I love that you just started talking about is now that we have kind of these three types, right, of detractors. I love that word. It's like, stop distracting from me. Talk a little bit about, like, I'm thinking about myself as a leader, right? Or if I'm helping my clients or doing large scale transformation, or even small scale, or even one-off sort of things, or even through executive coaching, right? Like, I think about these three groups of detractors, and I'm like, how do I even prioritize one? Or like, what does that look like? Like, what does prioritization look like with these three groups?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So, couple of different ways to think about prioritization, and this is a little bit of the academic exercise.
Yeah.
But this is the fun part, but the hardest part of change, right? Is dealing with the people. So one thing is think about their level of influence. Those who could really derail, sometimes you might call them derailers versus detractors. If they have a high level of influence, they should be on your radar. Two, if they have control over resources, right? Change, whether it's people, whether it's technology, whether it's budget, so that work can get done, those who are controlling the resources become really critical people to make sure that they're not only aligned, but they're supportive to a certain extent. Three, people who have impact within the organization. Who is everyone else listening to? Who is everyone else taking their cues from? We've all been through change ourselves. Who's the one getting all the phone calls saying, hey, how are you thinking about this? Are you on board? What did you think of what such and such said today? Those are people you got to keep your eye on and learn how to leverage them strategically. And then finally, those what I like to call the domino effect. If you get them supportive, other people follow, right? So it's a little bit of the domino effect because the reality is we are so busy driving change within these organizations, we don't have time to talk to each and every person. So who is strategically placed like dominoes that if we get to them, others catch on fire and really help us drive the change. So those are some of the factors. And then on top of that, I'll go back to the first point I made a little bit ago. You want to think about where are they today and where do I need them? So if we thought about it on a scale of 1 to 10, and this might surprise some of you, but everyone you don't need as a cheerleader at the end of the day, right? Oh, yeah, let's go make the change. Woo woo. Like everyone doesn't have to be there. Some people you may just need to go from negative to neutral. I don't want them to be negative, but they don't have to be super positive. And this is one of the things, and I got to give a shout out to GE on this one, General Electric, because we had exercises when we were driving change management where we could literally map stakeholders against that criteria. And that's where I really learned like everyone doesn't have to be a 10. So moving someone from if they're at a 0 or 1 to a 6 is a huge jump. That person may be someone you need to prioritize versus someone who's at a 5 on your scale that needs to get to 6. So who are the people who have to make the biggest leap based on some of those other factors I laid out? High level of influence, control over resources, the impact that they have within the organization, and then those who can drive a domino effect. So it's a nice little exercise I would encourage a lot of you to do with others to really say, okay, if I only could focus on 5 or 6 or 3 or 4, key people who could potentially derail, here's who they are. And then you can build a strategy, a specific, unique strategy for each one of them and track them over time to make sure they're getting to where you need them to get to.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you added on the track over time, right? Because it's like one thing to like push the boulder and like to create some inertia and momentum, but like, are they actually continuing it? So one question I have for you too, and I know our the ChangeNerd community is so into like the pragmatic approaches around and sort of the case studies and narratives around, I'm thinking about this like a detractor. Like I can think back to even myself as a detractor or, other, companies that I was helping sort of facilitate a business transformation. And I can think of groups of detractors or whatnot. And to your point, like they were almost the biggest inspiration for me to create, a new sort of solution to something that I may not have thought about. Even myself, like, why am I not buying into this? Like, how else, if I'm thinking about it, other people might think about it. So what I want to ask you, and I'm sure other people were using, sort of tactics and techniques on me, just like that is our job too in change management or business transformation. I'm just going to ask you this, like, can you think back to maybe like 1 or 2 instances where you thought about like, okay, I laid this out. I did my sort of detractor analysis, if they are, stakeholder analysis. And then I envision it as sort of a sub, thing. It's like, here are stakeholders and here's sort of, the sub detractor list, if you will.
Yeah.
Tell us about a time and like kind of what you did from moving somebody from like, over on the negative or whatever word you want to use, the lower end of the scale to neutral or even 1 or 2 steps up or even all the way over. I'm sure you have a couple of examples of that, and feel free to share as many as you like, but I'm sure they come to your head.
Absolutely. I'm not naming any names, and I'm going to say I'm looking over at least a decade worth of experience. So those are my caveats.
Yes, I'm probably in there too, Daisha, so that's fine. Include me in there.
There you have it. So one that comes to mind, I was driving a very broad transformation between 2 key functional groups. We'll just call it that. And we were trying to think through, this required commercial sponsorship. And we were trying to think through who were the right commercial leaders that really would be representative of a very large group of commercial teams and people. And one particular business we had no engagement from. And we knew that they would be not only the biggest beneficiary of change, but we had the furthest to go with them because they were working in a very siloed manner. And so one of the things we learned, and I actually had some conversations with folks to say, hey, to get your business on board, like who do they listen to over there? Like I didn't even know. So I had to ask, and it was the GM of that business. If he says it, everyone does it. Great. So I took that information to our leadership team who was sponsoring, I'm the day-to-day leader, but my executive sponsors at the time. And we brought this person on as an executive sponsor. So we put them in a position, and at the time, I would say they weren't even neutral. They were a little negative. And this is someone who's outspoken, so that could be kind of dangerous, right? He would be the first one to say, you didn't do anything for me. And he would let everybody know you didn't do anything for me. But to me, like those are some of the people that I like to take on that challenge with, right? Because when you win them, you really win them. And so we brought him on as an executive sponsor. So that was number one. We are going to create an environment where we are getting input from you. And I want to stress the importance of that, right? Because part of our value proposition internally was, why do we need to change? And I think that's one of the most important, valuable pieces that detractors bring, because they're telling you all the reasons, whether they're apathetic or they don't think it can be done, or they're actively resisting. Once you start interviewing and talking to them, you find out those things that you need to overcome, or those portions of your value proposition that are either missing or that need to come to the forefront to say, here's what's in it for you. Here's what we're going to drive to make this successful year. Here's other things we're going to now put into the strategy to make sure we're getting that feedback on these areas that you think we've overlooked in the past. And so we were able to have those type of interviews with this particular individual as they were coming on board. But we did, to get to the very pragmatic things, some other very practical things we did. We would have meetings with the commercial team once a month at first, and then we went to a once a quarter cadence. He would be speaking at the meeting. We'd prep him with talking points. So even if he didn't fully believe it up front, he was talking about it. Right. So that at least, turned the antennas in the face. Well, if he's at least talking about it, maybe I should, listen in a little bit. So that was one. Two, we actually did pilots of new processes, right? Many of you know we do pilots before you launch large scale. We did it in his business. Let's test it out with you. Let's learn, let's craft. And number one, he loved it, right? Any extra investment time. And if we're going to make more money for the business, he's a salesperson. He was in. And so taking the time to do the pilots and proving out some of the concepts and him quickly seeing the value really helped us to win him over, to the point, honestly, that he was an advocate. I mean, to the point where he was like, thou shalt, sales team, do X, Y, and Z. And they did it. And so really understanding, like back to that domino effect, how critical he was as the leader, and putting him in a situation to be that executive sponsor and to do the pilot with him. And I mean, really make myself accessible to him. Call me anytime. If something didn't go the way that we committed to it going, you have my cell phone number. He called me. We talk about it. When I got success stories back from some of his team, I'd send it back like, look, we're making their life easier. He loved it, right? So also creating those communication feedback loops and being accessible to say, hey, I'm not just going to talk to you in the beginning and then go away. Like, we're in this together. We're partnering. If it's a struggle and we haven't done something right, like, bring it to me. I want to work through that with you. And I think building those type of partnerships in this particular case really took someone, probably, like I said, a little negative, not even neutral, to someone who became one of our biggest advocates, and his business benefited a lot as a result.
Yeah, I love that story. I want to ask you so many questions. We have such a short period of time. That was such a brilliant example, especially because I think everyone listening to this has been in that position, whether it was, they themselves facilitating the large scale business transformation, or working on a team that had to come up with solutions to move people along that gradient. And one of the things that I love that you just shared, I mean, you basically were just a walking sort of billboard for your four, specific things around how do you really help people move. And, you talked a little bit about influence, right? Like, this detractor has immediate influence from his
Absolutely.
power and hierarchy name, right? As the GM. So you knew he had a large, sort of span of influence. And then looking as well as at sort of the impact that this individual could have. You knew without him on board, there may be a minimal impact, right? Like a little bit of like the people here and there, you could move it, but if we could get him, like that's going to make a huge impact. And then the other one that you had mentioned, domino effect already, but the third one that you had mentioned was control. As the GM in that power position, and for everybody listening, I think that's one of the things that we underestimate a lot is how much this individual has control over performance evaluations of his people, right? I've heard people say, don't do that, and it's like, ugh, right? It's threats, control over the pocketbook, right? Finances, like, well, wait, how much are we going to invest in this? What does that look like? So, you just narrated an incredible story about everything that you just talked about, really around that influence, that impact, that control, and the domino effect on where you should focus from a detractor standpoint. So thank you for sharing that. Any other closing thoughts on that before?
Yeah, just a couple of things, right?
Yeah.
So early on, some quick tips. Interview your detractors. You really want to set the stage that this is going to be an open, transparent working relationship, and then you're going to listen. You're not just going to tell them, right? You're going to listen, you're going to digest. There might be some debate, but we're going to align and we're going to move forward with the vision and the charter that's set. And if something's not right about that, we're going to work through that together too. So I think doing that, addressing their objections throughout, right? Early on. Well, why not? Tell me more. Who else should I speak to, right? So once again, being open to hearing more. While you're kind of in the midst of the transformation, this is where can they take leadership? Not only sponsorship over the overall project, but you may have surveys, you may have workshops. What can be their role in those situations that really helps them to either hear other viewpoints or to help drive the change by first kind of internalizing it themselves, right? If you're going to be a facilitator, you got to internalize it yourself. So you're helping to change them with maybe out them even knowing it. So those are some things that have been helpful. And then as they start to believe, gathering those testimonials and putting it into your communications, and then asking them to advocate. Like, you have an advocate when they're willing to talk to their peers or willing to talk to their teams about what's happening and why. And that to me is the true test. If you really need this person to be an advocate, that you've really gotten them there, because they're like, absolutely, I got you covered. I'm going to take care of that in this meeting and that meeting. And that's really what you want. You just want to keep moving people along those continuums. So detractors are real, Stephanie, but we got a lot of tips and tools and ways to address it. Don't shy away from it. It's a good thing. It means, that you are doing something that's big enough that somebody's like, hold on a second here, but you can take them along for the journey. And I know all of you can be successful in that.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, good. Let's I know we had a short period of time, so let's take a couple of minutes. I want to give a shout out to your book, The Transformation Playbook, the 7 winning strategies. Yeah, can you show it? Okay, good. Thank you. Y'all can get that on Amazon, right? There's an e-version too, I believe, Kindle version. There's actually a chapter on detractors, which love this. I'm gonna get it today because I feel like I'm like, let me read up on it. But I also have access to you, Aisha, so this is perfect. Yeah, so giving a shout out to you. Let's take this in a little bit of a turn, a little bit of a change, I guess, of a concept. Are you cool with that?
Let's go.
I think one of the number one things that I get often is, I want to write a book, Stephanie. Like, how do I start? Or I want to write a book, Stephanie, out of all my blog posts or all of my, videos or LinkedIn posts. How do I do that? And one of the things that I love to do is connect people who are writing books, who have written books, one being you, with this process. So if you're cool with it, let's actually just switch a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about the process of writing that book. So whatever you want to share, if there are people listening that are thinking about getting into it, what would you suggest? What advice would you give them? And then what was your process?
Sure. So first of all, if you want to write a book, do it. I mean, that's first and foremost. For me, you know, I've been at my career 20 plus years and I've learned some things. And I'm at a point where I want to share that with others in a way that is pragmatic, in a way that can drive impact beyond myself, right? and so that people don't make the same mistakes maybe I made or get there faster. And all these thoughts in your head or on different pieces of paper for those of you that are bloggers, it's nice to like package it together and understand what you think about something and to put it out into the world, because the reality is it's going to help somebody. And that's why I wanted to write the book. I didn't know how many people would help, but I knew it would help somebody who's doing what we're all doing here, driving change. And so I'll be honest, it's been on my bucket list for like 3 or 4 years. And I wanted to do it, but you're always like, when is the right time? The right time is now. Okay. So it's a little bit of, in terms of my process, I had to understand myself. And I'm a very structured person. And one of the things that I knew I needed, because I'd never written a book before, was I needed someone to create structure for me in a way that I could kind of grab onto it and be consistent in terms of my process. So I actually went to a book camp, and there are a lot of different people who offer different book camps. Particular one that I went to, I don't know if some people are familiar with Les Brown. He was a motivational speaker. He had a lot of proteges. I went to one of his conferences and he had people there. And there was a person there who said, I run book camps and I help people write books. And I'm like, sign me up because I need to write a book. And so it was really good. It was 3 days. And I think what made it great for me was focus. So regardless of if you go through a formal structure or not, how are you going to focus on writing your book? How are you going to be disciplined about it? For others that I know who have written books, they have accountability partners who call them and say, did you spend your 2 hours today writing? And the thing you have to be careful of is don't worry about getting it right the first time, which slows people down, right? We want to be perfectionists. We want to say it the right way. Just write. Just if it's going to be 30 minutes a day, spend 30 minutes a day writing. If it's 2 hours, spend 2 hours writing. In the book camp, that's all I did for 3 days. I did nothing else but focus on this book and outline the book. I mean, I had a title in like 2 hours. I had been thinking about this for 3 years, and in 2 hours, all of a sudden I had a title. So just that focus alone and creating a structure outline. And I actually recorded my book and then got it dictated. So for me, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna sit here and type. No, I just recorded it on an app with my phone, because as you see, as I'm talking to you now, you could be writing your book.
Yes.
And so that's how I wrote my book. And then I took that draft and I did hire a professional editor. But I'm a little bit, of a perfectionist. I want things a certain way, right? My voice. So there was an editing process, right? I did the first edit because after I recorded it, I realized some stuff was missing. I wanted to move some information around. Then I sent it to a professional editor. She sent it back. Then I went back through it and did one more edit of the book. So really that editing process is critical, and everyone should hire a professional editor. And then honestly, because I didn't go through a big publisher, if you have a big following, maybe you can get a publisher off the bat. But I ended up getting a lot of like entrepreneurial services off Fiverr, right? That's how I got my cover design. They helped with the formatting, so I had some professional services that around the editing and some of that, make sure it was polished and, kind of set up correctly to be published. And I was able to publish it through the same person that I went through the book camp with. But some of the other ancillary things you need around it, I actually just, use some freelancing services and got to me high quality work. And then published it for me on Amazon. As I write another book down the road, I'll probably do something different. But that was a little bit of my process. So it's about staying organized, having accountability, and figuring out what that looks like for you. I know throughout one of the things I learned about myself, if I can share this and be vulnerable for a moment, was I was a little nervous about putting that someone wasn't going to like my ideas. And that's what was actually slowing me down. It wasn't that I didn't have time. It was like, what if they don't like what I say? And so part of my journey was getting over that and saying, you know what, I learned something and it's going to be valuable for somebody. There are always going to be people that don't like it. But there'll be some people that do benefit from it. And I'm really excited about the book and the feedback that I've gotten on the book, because it is very pragmatic. It is very practical, and it's helping people. And that was my primary goal for writing it. So hopefully that shares a little bit about the process, but I encourage all of you to go for it. If you got those blogs, put them together. There are different ways to think about how you can structure a book. in a way, but you've got a lot of content. Go ahead and put it out there. There are people who can really benefit from it.
I love it. So one of my favorite things that you said is, as a fellow extrovert, I know many people listening to this are also extroverts, and if you're introverted, you also have this option. So don't worry, I'm not marginalizing any group. But I so appreciated the fact that you dictated your book. That is incredible. And the other thing, the huge key takeaway that I had from sort of you narrating your process was, I think so often, like, you're so successful. You've done such incredible work, Daisha. Like, we have a group of really strong, incredible women, men, individuals who don't, identify as a specific gender, et cetera. And it's like, it's okay for us to use resources. And all that means is ask for help in the gaps and the areas that you may not be experts in, right? And be vulnerable. So thank you for sharing all that. And say, like, I have no idea how to write a book. Okay, well, listen to Daisha and start your process somewhere. One of the things I know I get asked a lot is, where do you find professional editors, or where do you find publishers? So I don't know if you have insight on that. What's the process to find a professional editor? Is that a Craigslist ad? Is that a Fiverr thing? Is it a, no, you should go legit? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
There's lots of places you can find them. I mean, I found mine through kind of the book camp that I went to, and I paid money for the book camp, but I mean, all in all, I don't think it was a huge, crazy investment. And there were editors attached to that, but you can go on LinkedIn. I mean, I know a lot of people just from my corporate background who do professional writing and editing. So I think it's probably pretty easy to find editors. In terms of publishers, there are a lot of different ones out there. I'm sure if you Google it, you can find a list. I'm not even sure what the list is. But one of the things that's interesting, because I've talked to some other friends who are writing books right now, is if you've got a strong following on Twitter, you're more likely to get somebody to pick up your book. So for those who really are serious about, like, I want to make this go worldwide big, and I want to go through a well-known publisher, that's one of the ways that publishers even know who they want to pick up in terms of sending manuscripts or publishing. And typically Twitter, surprisingly, is there's some stats out there, but that's one of the places that they look. So if you're not on Twitter and you need to be on Twitter to get your big audience, that's a great place to go to be an influencer, to do that. For my first book, it was more important for me to get out there. So you can kind of call me sort of self-published with the support of this group. But I think, you can still get a quality product out there, and just start somewhere, right? Wherever you are, start somewhere. And there are also a lot of different groups on Fiverr and things like that that kind of give you resources about how to write a book or how to publish a book, whether you self-publish or go through a publisher. So no shortage of options. And I think just the world that we live in today, everything is easier, everything is more accessible. And you can do it on your own with less red tape than maybe in the past.
Totally. Moral of the story, everybody, get started. Go get that book right now. I love it. All right. So before we close out, or we say adieu to everybody, I want to give you the opportunity. Any last minute thoughts, advice, tips, things that you have on your mind as we sort of close out from today, both talking about, thank you for allowing us to talk about detractors and, writing a book. Thoughts that you might have, or last minute comments?
So first of all, thank you, Stephanie. I'm so glad you found me. I'm happy to be a new member of the ChangeNerd community. I think the work that all of you are doing, that all of us are doing together, is important. So just really excited for that. In terms of the quote, I'll leave you with the quote, actually, that's connected with this chapter in my book. And for those of you that are sports fans, this is a quote by John Wooden, that says, "Do not let what you cannot do interfere with what you can do." So that's important as we deal with detractors, right? Don't focus on what you can't do, focus on what you can do. And the same thing with writing your book or following your passions or the work that you're leading. Don't let it interfere. Don't let it stop you. Don't let it detract you. Don't let it derail you. Just go forward, focus on what you can do. And I know all of you will continue to have a great impact on the organizations and on the world. So this has been fun. I hope it's been as much fun for you, Stephanie, as it has been for me.
Yes, I love it. We could always talk forever, Daisha. So, yeah, first and foremost, thank you for taking the time to chat with us. This is always fun as usual. For those of you listening right now, go ahead and connect with Aisha on LinkedIn. You can also connect with her, I'm sure, on a number of other arenas as well by purchasing her book if that's something that you're interested in. We definitely support you hands-on all around. So if anything, if you are not a change nerd yet, it's free to join the community. It's community.changenerd.com. Again, it's community.changenerd.com. Go ahead and head to that website. You can sign in with your LinkedIn credentials, join for free with a number of other individuals who are doing very similar things to you all. And we're really thinking differently and innovatively about how we're going out and doing business transformation across the world. So with that being said, I hope you all enjoyed today. I hope you all have an excellent rest of the week. And yeah, we'll connect with you all soon. If you have any comments, questions, or anything, go ahead and leave those comments below. And then in addition as well, go ahead and you can follow our YouTube channel, ChangeNerd Community. And then we look forward to hearing from you all soon. So have a great rest of the week.